Viewer discretion is advised. This clip contains weapons-grade hypocrisy. No, the world's biggest victims right now are the Duke and Duchess of Netflix. When it comes to compassion and empathy, where's Meghan's been for her own father? This gruesome twosome only survived by cashing in on what's left of their royal status now.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth.
Oh, God, you wouldn't know the truth if it hit you around the back of your head.
They say every royal scandal needs a ringleader, and for the past several years, Piers Morgan has worn that crown with unapologetic swagger. He opens his nightly tirades with the same battle cry, demanding King Charles stop the whining millennial windbags once and for all. The clip rolls, the studio lights flare, and he slams his fist on the desk, insisting the monarch must strip the titles, lock the gates, and cast them out.
I said it before, I'll say it again tonight. King Charles should strip them of all their remaining titles and cast them out from any connection to the royal family. How could any of them trust them, as far as I could throw them? Because without it, they're just whining millennial windbags with a permanent victim complex, knowing that victimhood is what makes them all the money.
That line, delivered with volcanic certainty, has become the rallying drumbeat for viewers tired of Sussex headlines. Morgan frames the call as patriotic duty, not petty feud, warning that if the palace remains silent, the monarchy will bleed credibility until nothing is left but glossy Netflix thumbnails and late-night confessionals. He paints King Charles as a father torn between blood and duty, yet reminds him that crown and country must come first. Every syllable feels like a dare. Do you have the steel to match my fury? Critics scoff that Morgan is simply chasing clicks, but there is no denying the man's reach. Morning shows, primetime slots, social media blasts, he flings this ultimatum across every platform, repeating it like gospel. Each time he revisits the demand, the adjectives sharpen: treacherous, grifters, royal parasites. He argues that the Sussex's duchy branding pumps oxygen into a spectacle that should have fizzled years ago. Remove the oxygen, he says, and the blaze will starve.
When the stakes are this high, doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
Oh, shut up. What do you mean the stakes are this high? Who do you think you are? Other than a latte-munching imbecile living in luxury in California while the rest of the world's a cost of living crisis, moaning and whining about an institution which gave you the titles on which you now trade millions of dollars. What are you talking about? What stakes?
The next morning, Piers watched every newsfeed light up with photos of Meghan and Harry's first secret date. No follow-up message, no polite thanks for the drink, nothing. He tells audiences that realization hit him like a freight train. He had been, in his words, ghosted by a duchess in waiting. That sting haunts his rhetoric to this day, fueling the suspicion that the couple discard people the moment usefulness expires.
The hypocrisy is beyond anything I've ever seen.
From there, the emotional gears shifted fast. Piers's commentary took a sharper edge, his morning monologues laced with a new urgency. Friends warned him that going after a royal romance could backfire. He shrugged them off, insisting honesty mattered more than optics. On air, he joked about sending Meghan's unread message bubbles to voicemail. Off-air, insiders say producers debated whether the budding feud might actually boost ratings.
This is a delusional, treacherous, bitter little man who's completely lost touch with all reality, a multi-millionaire who's raked in a fortune by regularly abusing his family and regurgitating private stories in books and TV shows while simultaneously lecturing the rest of us about not invading privacy.
Yet critics argue the episode proves nothing beyond bruised ego. They say journalists chase and lose sources every day, and that turning personal disappointment into a multi-year campaign borders on obsession. Even so, Morgan never lets the anecdote fade. He sprinkles it into interviews, columns, and late-night appearances, each retelling sharper, each pause more dramatic, as if daring Meghan to break her silence. He claims the ghosting exposed a pattern of transactional relationships, and he points to former palace aides signing non-disclosure agreements as further evidence that once someone's usefulness ends, the drawbridge comes up.
Today, Harry and Meghan torched what little was left of their relationship with the royal family and what little was left, frankly, of their own reputations.
Beresford calmly suggested that Piers's fixation on Meghan might be colored by personal history, that perhaps he should consider dialing back the vitriol. The studio temperature plummeted, Piers's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat he seemed frozen between fight and flight. Then he chose the theatrical middle ground. He stood, muttered a curt, "Right, I'm done," and marched off set. The camera caught every step, the startled silence, the awkward shuffling of papers. Moments later, viewers heard him in a corridor but still wired to his mic, calling it pathetic that he had to absorb criticism when he had spent his career dishing it.
You continue to trash her.
Okay, I'm done with this.
No.
Sorry, no.
Sorry. Do you know what? That's pathetic.
You can trash me, mate, but not mine.
No. I'm being...
Sorry, can't do
This is
this.
absolutely diabolical behaviour.
Social media ignited like dry tinder. Hashtags bearing his name trended for 12 straight hours. Some hailed him as a truth-telling martyr who would not endure censorship by snowflakes. Others mocked the irony of the free speech crusader storming off because someone exercised free speech. The network counted more than 50,000 complaints by dusk, a record pace. Sponsors grew nervous. HR scheduled urgent calls. And by dinner time the next evening, after refusing to apologize for saying he did not believe Meghan Markle's mental health account, Piers was gone. The resignation became a global moment.
Alex, Alex, yes.
Well, hang on. I'm going to come Alex in a sec.
Okay, all right, I'll wait.
Well,
Would you mind waiting?
Actually, I don't know, no. Carry on.
It's you, mate. I'm just going to...
With that backdrop, he sharpened his favorite epithet, Harry the treacherous little weasel. The phrase ricocheted across tabloids, sparked petitions, and prompted frantic palace briefings. Morgan argued that if a sovereign once relinquished an empire for romance, then surely a modern king could yank honorary titles to safeguard public trust. Royal watchers who usually swim in nuance found themselves grappling with his blunt arithmetic. You cannot cling to duchy branding while bashing the very system that confers it. He hammered the logic until it rang like church bells on a cold London morning.
One of the people who's been accused of bullying is Meghan Markle by several of her PAs at the palace, who had to sign NDAs so they couldn't tell the truth.
Yet beneath the bombast lay an astute reading of public fatigue. Polls showed a swelling fraction of taxpayers wondering why, during an economic squeeze, security funds and ceremonial honors still cushioned a couple living in California sunshine. Morgan seized that mood, presenting himself as the mouthpiece for every commuter staring at rising energy bills while scrolling through paparazzi shots of Montecito mansions. He contrasted Prince William pinning medals on Welsh guards with Meghan's much-mocked state visit to a boutique coffee shop, casting one as stoic service, the other as influencer vapor. Still, palace aides whispered that his relentless drumbeat threatened delicate diplomacy. Strip the titles, they warned, and you risk handing the Sussexes fresh martyrdom content for the next documentary cycle. But Morgan scoffed at caution, branding it cowardice wrapped in silk curtains.
Nobody set out to destroy you. You destroyed yourselves in this country with your ludicrous, hypocritical behaviour. The truth be told, what she just said is complete and utter garbage.
He reminded viewers that royals survive by projecting unshakable resolve, hesitation. He said smells like weakness, and weakness invites more grenades. His monologues became nightly ultimatums delivered straight at Buckingham's gilded gates. Whether you saw him as principled watchdog or raging agitator, one fact was undeniable. His calls reverberated beyond studio walls. Parliamentary backbenchers echoed his talking points during committee sessions. Op-ed pages debated precedents for title revocation, citing Piers Morgan had brandished on screen. Even staffers in Clarence House reportedly clipped headline printouts to internal memos, evidence that the noise outside was creeping indoors. And as the debate intensified, a fresh windfall of streaming cash and tell-all pages would stoke his fury even higher, because in Morgan's calculus, nothing funds hypocrisy faster than a 9-figure content deal. The Sussex media machine swung into high gear when the streaming behemoth dangled a contract rumored to sit comfortably in the 9-figure range, and Piers Morgan pounced on that number like a hawk spotting prey. Night after night, he rebranded the couple as the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, sneering that their entire public identity now hinged on playing professional victims for binge culture.
Well, the journalist Piers Morgan has quit his role as host of popular British breakfast program Good Morning Britain after controversial comments he made about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
From his vantage, every camera angle in the 6-part docuseries seemed choreographed not to illuminate truth, but to lacquer new grievance onto the brand. He rattled off the sequence, tearful confessional, ominous violin, wide shot of Montecito lawns. Then he leaned toward his studio lens and growled that each beat was worth a few more million on the balance sheet. He reminded viewers that a first edition of Spare allegedly fetched one of the largest royal memoir advances in modern publishing, and he scoffed that victimhood has become their single most lucrative export.
If people want to believe Meghan Markle, that's entirely their right. I don't believe almost anything that comes out of her mouth, and I think the damage she's done to the British monarchy and to the Queen at a time when Prince Philip is lying in hospital is enormous and frankly contemptible. So if I have to fall on my sword for expressing an honestly held opinion about Meghan Markle and that diatribe of bilge that she came out with in that interview, so be it.
Morgan framed the payday as proof that pain sells better than duty. He waved spreadsheets on air, comparing global rating spikes for tell-all specials to the modest numbers generated by the couple's philanthropic live streams. He noted that when Harry hosted polo content, social chatter barely flickered, but the minute he lambasted his brother's temper or their father's parenting style, trending lists exploded. To Morgan, the pattern was unmistakable. Trade privacy for profit, claim the spotlight is toxic, then step back under it wearing a brighter costume.
But by far the most sickening part of this show for me was the constant use of Harry's late mother, Princess Diana, to stoke sympathy for Meghan.
Critics of Piers countered that he cherry-picks revenue figures while ignoring the couple's actual charity grants. They argued that modern audiences expect royals to fund their own lives rather than lean on public purses, and that the Sussexes are merely following the free market rulebook. But Morgan never flinched. He argued the arrangement is a bait and switch. They leveraged state-conferred titles to secure corporate checks, then attacked the state for holding them back. He emphasized that the documentary teased racist royals without naming culprits, guaranteeing perpetual intrigue and a sequel payday. For viewers who felt taxed by the endless drama, his breakdown clicked. He channeled kitchen table frustration, asking why a couple who warned they might lose everything over security costs were simultaneously sealing syndication deals that dwarf the annual budget of many small charities.
And what can we do? What can I do to make it better?
I don't know. What could you do to make it better? You're just so special.
His monologues made the mystery feel personal, like an overdraft fee you never approved. And still, he promised, the most sickening hypocrisy was yet to be unmasked. Because if the Netflix windfall proved anything, it is that the Sussex brand feasts on heartbreak, especially heartbreak tied to the ghost of a beloved princess. Morgan vowed to reveal how invoking Diana's legacy crossed a line no streaming contract should ever touch. Morgan saved his most theatrical outrage for the moments he believed desecrated royal memory. None more sacred than the late Princess Diana, when the Netflix series dropped blurred paparazzi shots of young Harry and slow pans across candlelit tributes. Piers's fury shot off the charts. He stared into camera with a mix of shock and disgust, declaring it grotesque exploitation to weaponize Diana's aura for streaming clicks.
Now, the king can end this feud, Harry's right, but not by shaking hands with this treacherous little weasel, but by stripping him and his wife of the royal titles that they love to use for commercial gain without doing any of the work.
He insisted the grief of a nation was being recycled into B-roll, claiming that every mournful violin note was really a cash register chime. Viewers felt the sting because Morgan wrapped his critique in personal authority. He reminded them he had met Diana, had interviewed her friends, had watched her coffin roll past in stunned silence. Then he contrasted that authenticity with what he called Meghan's tear-on-cue theatrics, casting doubt on every glossy close-up. Even supporters of the Sussex narrative admitted the montage felt heavy-handed. But Morgan went further, branding it a moral line crossing you simply do not come back from. Privacy hypocrisy ranked second only to the Diana charge. He replayed clips of Meghan lamenting tabloid intrusion, then smashed cut to drone shots of their Montecito estate licensed to global broadcasters. He rolled Harry's pleas for mental health space, then cut to his appearance on late-night comedy, mugging for camera and raiding sandwiches. By the time the montage ended, viewers could practically hear the studio audience gasping at the whiplash.
No, the world's biggest victims right now are the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, and don't take my word for it.
But Morgan's critique did not end at public messaging. He dove into personal conduct. He cited the palace bullying investigation that remains sealed behind non-disclosure agreements. He reminded audiences that at least one former staffer alleged being reduced to tears, and he openly challenged Meghan to sue him if his summary was inaccurate. The audacity electrified supporters and infuriated critics, yet it underscored his broader claim. Behind curated compassion speeches, an entirely different atmosphere allegedly brewed.
But by far the most sickening part of this show for me was the constant use of Harry's late mother, Princess Diana, to stoke sympathy for Meghan. Having known both women, Princess Diana and Meghan Markle, I can say with absolute certainty they had nothing in common whatsoever. I couldn't think of two women more different.
He tied those allegations back to the Diana comparison, suggesting genuine empathy would start at home with fathers ignored after strokes and aides who felt demeaned. His cadence slowed, almost incredulous, as he asked how a woman hailed as a global feminist icon could overlook her own parents' medical crisis. The question lingered heavy in the air, impossible to dismiss with a soundbite. Skeptics argued Morgan cherry-picks, that every public figure contains contradictions, but the narrative stuck because he stacked examples like dominoes, privacy pleas then paparazzi strolls, kindness talks then staff complaints, maternal litanies then estranged grandparents. The pileup created a simple, visceral takeaway. If the Sussex brand is compassion, why do so many former allies describe frost? And just when viewers assumed the hypocrisy tally could climb no higher, Morgan pivoted toward the couple's most incendiary claims, vowing to dissect the racism allegation and suicide narrative line by line, searching for proof in a haze of headline smoke. The Oprah interview still hangs over the monarchy like a storm cloud, and Piers Morgan takes aim at its darkest thunderclaps every chance he gets. First comes the racism allegation, Harry and Meghan's claim that an unnamed royal worried about their unborn child's skin tone. Morgan replays the moment with deliberate slowness, freezes the frame, and demands concrete evidence. Then he rolls a later clip in which Harry appears to walk the charge back, saying the comment was unconscious bias rather than outright bigotry.
Yet this man, Thomas Markle, raised Meghan on his own for many years. That wasn't in the documentary. That was glossed over. That was ignored. Just like he is now. He lives 70 miles away from them. It's about an hour-long cab ride. Never seen his grand.
Morgan's verdict is blunt. Either name and prove, or stop smearing. He insists the vagueness is calculated, maintaining maximum scandal without risking defamation. He cites palace statements that the issue was taken very seriously, yet handled privately, arguing the Sussexes had every opportunity to cooperate with an internal probe if truth mattered more than headlines. Critics counter that family loyalty and legal landmines make full disclosure impossible, but Morgan fires back that truth withstands any lawyer. Next, he zeroes in on Meghan's disclosure of suicidal thoughts and the claim that palace officials blocked her from help. He rolls his eyes at the logistics. Palace staff are civil servants, he says, not medieval jailers. He wonders where Harry, the mental health advocate, was during the crisis, and why he did not speed dial a private therapist.
Yet this man, Thomas Markle, raised Meghan on his own for many years. That wasn't in the documentary. That was glossed over. That was ignored. Just like he is now. He lives 70 miles away from them. It's about an hour-long cab ride. Never seen his grand.
Mental health organizations recoil when Morgan voices skepticism, warning that public doubt can silence vulnerable viewers. He counters that unverified stories can also breed cynicism and harm. The segment becomes a clash of moral imperatives: protect individuals who speak hard truths versus safeguard public discourse from potential fabrication. Morgan's solution is merciless transparency. Show the emails, reveal the meeting logs, prove obstruction. Without receipts, he argues, the allegation floats in perpetual insinuation, doing maximal reputational damage with minimal accountability. Supporters of the Sussexes point out that depression often thrives in secrecy, and that institutional cultures may discourage disclosure. Yet Morgan digs deeper, highlighting what he calls contradictions. Harry praising palace staff in earlier interviews, Meghan's later partnerships with mental health charities, the couple's access to world-class resources. He concedes that fame can amplify despair, but insists that leveraging despair for lucrative specials without ironclad corroboration edges into exploitation.
And how did you get to sit at the top table with all the world leaders, Meghan? Oh, could it be because he married a British prince and then dragged him out of his country?
By segment's end, viewers are left in no man's land. Those sympathetic to the Sussexes feel defensive. Those wary of unsubstantiated bombshells feel vindicated. That emotional whiplash is precisely Morgan's goal: shake complacency, demand receipts, and remind audiences that reputations, royal or otherwise, can be vaporized by one unchallenged anecdote. And as public opinion wobbles, he readies his next volley. Poll numbers showing a dramatic slide that even places the disgraced Prince Andrew above the California couple, a comparison as shocking as it is strategic. Polls rarely shake a royal tree on their own, but when numbers crater fast enough to rattle the palace chandelier, Piers Morgan slams them onto his desk with theatrical glee. He starts with the YouGov slide, once golden favorability for the Sussexes plunging below neutral, then below water, until one winter survey placed them in outright negative territory on both sides of the Atlantic. Morgan taps the chart, eyebrow arched, and declares it the people's verdict on weaponized victimhood.
I thought you've been telling your truth, which is often a pack of lies, from the moment you abandoned this country.
Then he unveils the comparison no publicist could spin, a fresh ranking that lists Prince Andrew, yes, the prince engulfed in scandal, as marginally more popular than Harry and Meghan in the United States. The studio gasps on cue. Morgan lets the silence hang a heartbeat before hammering the punchline. Imagine falling beneath that benchmark. Now you know the price of hypocrisy.
That clip of Meghan once showing us how she could cry like that at the drop of a little tarnished tiara. Remember that? She could do it like that. Just bear that in mind when you watch it. Did you get that one?
To underpin the shock, Morgan flips through headlines like cards in a magician's deck. Variety calls the Netflix show unimagined and frustrating. The Guardian brands it so sickening I almost brought up my breakfast. And even the usually sympathetic New York Times publishes a think piece asking if Harry's confessional tour has finally exhausted American goodwill. Each citation lands like a drumbeat, building the sense of a cultural tide turning.
And as for the shameful comparisons with Princess Diana, I remember Prince Harry being very, very angry about the media exploiting his mother for commercial gain. Yeah, what has he done with this Netflix series? He's used his mother to sell it.
Morgan argues the backlash is not merely tabloid noise, it is a referendum on authenticity. He notes that audiences have a high tolerance for trauma stories, up to the moment they suspect those stories are being repackaged for endless resale. Once that suspicion hardens, sentiment shifts from empathy to ridicule, and he claims that shift is now in full stampede. Critics of Morgan counter that polls capture fleeting moods, that sample sizes shrink in news cycle whirlwinds. They also point out that tying anyone's reputation to Prince Andrew's yardstick feels gratuitously harsh. Morgan shrugs off the nuance. He says perception is reality in media warfare, and perception currently casts the Sussex brand as a punchline. He references late-night skits lampooning Harry's best sandwich confession, and TikTok compilations, sizing up Meghan's self-references, 54 mentions of herself in 7 minutes, he reminds viewers. What stings even more, he claims, is the palace's dignified silence, contrasting with a Sussex PR engine that cannot stop feeding the meme mill.
Meghan was supposed to be lecturing young people about equality, which is her favourite subject from her Californian mansion, but instead she stuck to her specialist subject, the one she currently really loves, which is talking about herself.
As Morgan tells it, the royals will quietly survive any storm. The Netflix couple, on the other hand, risk calcifying as celebrity curiosities, famous for being unfavorably famous. He leaves the segment on a simmering question. With numbers this grim, does the palace even need to act? Or is reputational gravity already doing the heavy lifting? But before viewers can ponder, Morgan teases the rumble behind closed gates, a series of quiet moves by King Charles that suggest the crown might strike after all, employing velvet gloves that hide an iron strategy. Behind the roar of television studios, something far quieter has been unfolding in the royal corridors. Courtiers do not shout their intentions, they fold them into diary reshuffles, housing notices, and seating plans. The most visible tremor came when King Charles reportedly ordered the Sussexes to vacate Frogmore Cottage, an eviction notice delivered, insiders claim, barely 24 hours after Spare hit the shelves.
Could there be a more grotesque exploitation, or a more hypocritical one, than him using his dead mother's imagery to engender sympathy for himself again as the great victim in this world?
Morgan greeted that move like a general receiving long-awaited reinforcements. He replayed headlines announcing the key exchange, savoring the symbolism of a monarch reclaiming crown property from a couple now critiquing that very institution. Yet palace aides framed it more subtly. The king, dealing with a slimmed-down working roster and a property budget under parliamentary scrutiny, merely reallocated space. To the public it looked colder, Charles drawing an invisible border across the Windsor estate, signaling that family descent no longer enjoys grace and favor walls. The second maneuver was softer, but in Morgan's telling, equally telling. Invitations to high-profile events, the coronation concert rehearsals, state banquet briefings, even informal summer receptions, flowed to every senior royal except the Montecito duo. No letters rescinding courtesy, no formal statements, just a silence that grew louder with every publication day. Morgan dissected the absence on screen, calling it the slow freeze that always precedes a snap.
As with all things Meghan, and Harry it would seem, the truth just doesn't really exist in their world. It's their truth, their version of it.
Then came the snub that seemed trivial yet carried ceremonial weight. Harry's name reportedly removed from the roster of counselors of state, replaced by the Princess Royal in certain contingency drafts. Constitutional experts insisted it was housekeeping, not hostility, but Morgan argued each adjustment tightened the vice. The message, he said, was unmistakable. Titles may linger for now, but functional power is sliding elsewhere. Still, palace strategists understand optics. Stripping titles outright could ignite global headlines portraying a grieving father wielding a guillotine. A slow-motion marginalization, however, cloaks decisive action in plausible deniability. Morgan calls this velvet exile, a phrase that resonates with viewers who picture chess pieces gliding instead of swords swinging. He maintains that every silent step reassigned patronages, missing balcony moments, diary overlaps that make travel inconvenient, builds a case that the institution has already answered his call, just in whispers rather than cannon fire. Yet skeptics note the royal household often operates on glacial timelines. Absence this quarter can transform into attendance the next, if family healing emerges.
Off to your California mansion to fleece your royal titles. Anyway, 54 times she mentioned herself in a 7-minute speech. Even I haven't done that in a speech. That gives you some idea of the scale.
Morgan dismisses that optimism, contending that public patience has snapped like a dry twig. If Charles reopens the gates without consequence, he claims, the crown's authority risks splintering. His nightly refrain, decisive symbolism, may satisfy for a season, but sooner or later a king must declare either your lineage serves the crown or it serves itself. And so the stage is set for an ultimatum decades in the making. The velvet gloves are slipping, and Morgan wagers the iron fist will show sooner than anyone expects. In our final stretch, we ask the question hanging over an ancient throne: If titles are the last thread, does Charles dare cut it? And how would Piers Morgan react when his fiercest wish finally collides with royal reality? The prospect of a monarch wielding the shears hovers like storm clouds over Buckingham, and Piers Morgan can almost taste the electricity. He imagines the scene, a terse palace statement at 5 o'clock, titles rescinded, styles retired, and the couple henceforth referred to simply as Mr. and Mrs. Mountbatten Windsor. Morgan believes the gesture would echo down the centuries, a sovereign's reminder that crowns bend to none, not even blood.
They lie all the time. Nothing they ever say seems to stand up to reasonable scrutiny. And I say that as somebody who lost his last job presenting Good Morning Britain because I wouldn't apologise for saying I didn't believe Meghan Markle. Think about that.
Yet beneath the bravado, he recognizes the human sting. He concedes that Charles is a father first, burdened by cancer treatments and tabloid flashbulbs, and to sever his son's dukedom might feel like a second amputation after losing a mother and a consort in swift succession. Morgan's voice softens when he considers that private pain, but only for a heartbeat. Then he steels himself, insisting leadership is forged in fire. He recalls the abdication crisis, the wars, the divorces, the relentless scrutiny. Moments when the crown survived because it acted, not because it hesitated. Legal scholars on his panel outline the pathway: a letter's patent revision rubber-stamped by Parliament, a swift royal assent, and the Sussex coats of arms retreated into the archives. Critics warn such a move could fuel lawsuits and martyr narratives. Morgan counters that martyrdom already fuels the brand. Better to render the titles inert than let them bankroll another docuseries. If the couple respond with litigation, he says, discovery might finally force daylight on the allegations he has spent years challenging.
Harry and Meghan take their audience for fools. They blame everybody but themselves. They present even the most incendiary of claims with no evidence. And sadly, the impact is real.
And what of the public? Polling suggests a majority would shrug or cheer, yet Morgan predicts a brief eruption of media thunder, followed by a new status quo. He points to the Frogmore eviction. Outraged tweets trended for 48 hours, then the story faded as quickly as it erupted. The monarchy's strength, he argues, is its glacier pace. Move, pause, let time do the polishing. In that space, he foresees Harry grappling with a dilemma: double down on outsider narratives, or concede that the oxygen of royal cachet has run out. For Morgan himself, the moment would be a vindication and a pivot. He jokes that if Charles ever swings the axe, he will pop open a bottle of non-royal champagne, then find new crusades, perhaps lobbying for transparency on those sealed bullying reports, or auditing the Sussex charity filings. His detractors say the goalposts will simply shift. That outrage is his business model. He retorts that accountability is not a season finale, it is a lifelong subscription. The curtain may or may not fall on titles, but the drama has already reshaped 21st century monarchy, celebrity, and media feuds. One simple signature could recast the players forever, and Piers Morgan stands ready to narrate every frame. So what do you think? Should King Charles draw the line at last, or is velvet exile enough? Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you will not believe what is coming next.